Pati Singhania, immediate past President IIMA and Vice Chairman and Managing Director JK Paper Limited, Professor S. Raghunath, Professor Strategy IIM Bangalore, and Chairman South Asia Board of the Academy of International Business, Mr. D. Shivkumar, past President IIMA and Group Executive President Corporate Strategy and Business Development, Aditya Birla Management Corporation, Mr. Arun Duggal, Chairman ICRA Limited, Dr. Padmini Srinivasan, Chairperson, Center for Corporate Governance and Citizenship, IIM Bangalore. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to have you join us today for this very special session hosted by IIMA and the IIM Bangalore. IIMA is delighted to partner with IIM Bangalore, and hopefully the event today will be just the start of many collaborations in promoting new management thinking and practices. Mr. Munjal, it is always a pleasure and privilege to have you with us, and many thanks for agreeing to chair the panel. You're one of India's most successful serial entrepreneurs and investors. You're also mentoring many startups in governance as they grow into unicorns and soonicorns. You've experienced the complexities of board composition and succession across startups, mature companies, and international joint ventures, which would bring great value to our discussion today. Thank you for joining us and a very warm welcome to you. Mr. Singhania, it's a pleasure to have you back on the IIMA platform once again after a break. We have been missing you. Many thanks for agreeing to join the panel. You have seen board governance in Indian business groups evolve across generations, and you have a close view of the emerging trends in board composition and succession. We look forward to hearing your insights on managing board succession, especially in a family-led business. Thank you so much for joining us. Shiv, it's always great to have you with us. You've had a distinguished career as a leader in diverse industries and geographies, and you have dealt with a variety of boards across Indian and foreign multinationals and the family-controlled and professionally led companies. We would love to hear your views on board succession planning across different kinds of companies, especially professionally led multinationals. Thank you once again so much for joining us. Professor Raghunath, it is such a pleasure to have you with us today. As a professor of strategy, a consultant, and a member of corporate boards, you have a unique understanding of board governance and performance. We look forward to learning from your study of the linkage between corporate performance and board renewal. Many thanks for joining us. Mr. Duggal, many thanks for being with us today and for agreeing to share your perspective on board succession. As the chair of one of India's leading credit rating companies and also a member of the boards of ITC, Jubilant Pharma, and Star Health and Insurance, you have a multidimensional view of board governance. We look forward to hearing your experiences and views on the subject. It's a pleasure to have you. A warm welcome to Professor Padmini Srinivasan, Chairperson, Center for Corporate Governance and Citizenship, IIM Bangalore. Dr. Srinivasan, you have worked with both the industry and the academia, and corporate governance has been a key area of your research and teaching. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a great pleasure to have you. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Ms. Greta Verghese, who is the COO of the Center for Corporate Governance at IIM Bangalore, for actually bringing the two organizations together by suggesting this program. Ladies and gentlemen, board succession is as critical as CEO succession, if not more. Too often, boards become clubby and barely changing over long periods. The burden of organizational outcomes are transferred mostly to the executives as the boards try to avoid rocking the boat. However, the pace and nature of change in business now requires a more frequent refreshing of boards. The COVID crisis has reminded us that it is critical to have the latest and multidimensional expertise in the board to make companies resilient and agile. Time has come for the boards to have a hard look at themselves and institutionalize succession and renewal that is commensurate with the prevailing and emerging demands of business. Diversity of boards has become both the political and strategic needs for organization. Not only is there pressure from the society to make boards more representative of the market by including women and experts from different social backgrounds, research has repeatedly shown that corporate performance improves when board inducts women, and it replaces some of the long-timers with new directors. In this session, we will learn about managing board succession from the experience and the perspective of our distinguished panelists. With these words, it is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Srinivasan to address us. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Center for Corporate Governance and Citizenship at IIM Bangalore, I would like to add my own welcome to all the distinguished panelists and the participants at the panel discussion on succession planning in boards, better ensure than endure. At the outset, I would also like to thank AIMA and Ms. Rekha Sethi and of course Greta, who were instrumental in putting together this outstanding session jointly with IIM Bangalore. Hope we have a great partnership going ahead. Very quickly and briefly, we at the Center for Corporate Governance and Citizenship at IIM Bangalore, are involved in corporate governance, and we have been established in the year 2003 to promote corporate governance best practices. The center was amongst the first to be accredited as the National Center for Excellence by the National Foundation for Corporate Governance, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India. The CCCGC's vision is to be a leading center for research, innovation, and impact in the areas of corporate governance and citizenship. And we do a variety of focus and have overarching themes, which include director education programs, research, evaluation, curriculum development, and other areas, including citizenship. Research, of course, is one of the key areas of our work, and we use it to track corporate governance development across markets, across sectors, globally as well. And as part of advocacy initiatives, the center also organizes a series of events, board conversations, CEO dialogues, seminars, workshops, and interaction with government and so on. We also partner with both industry as well as academia for further developing this aspect on governance and citizenship. Today's topic is very, very relevant and significant, as Rekha has already pointed out. From my perspective, I think three important aspects. One, ensuring continuity of business and resilience, particularly in this time of COVID and so on. So it becomes important. Second is another aspect, which is from a risk management perspective, completely different from what we are talking about, but ensuring how you can look at it from a very, very different angle of a risk management perspective. And of course, the third one, which is the Indian family business context, how you can transition to the next level of leadership and so on. I'm sure the deliberations of today's evening will provide a lot of new insights and takeaway on the subject. Once again, thanks to Mr. Munjal for moderating the session. Thank to the panel members, Mr. Singhania, Professor Raghunath, Mr. Shivkumar, and Mr. Arun Duggal for taking time out and addressing this very, very important topic. And no best time like now to address this issue on succession planning. Thanks once again, and welcome to all the participants and the panelists. Thank you. Over to you, Rekha. Over to you, Mr. Munjal.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Munjal, yeah.
Thank you. And thank you to IIM Bangalore and to AIMA for setting up this very critical, important, and a timely intervention in a subject that is increasingly getting more attention and coming center stage. And my compliments, Dr. Padmini Srinivasan, for having seen this a little bit ahead of time. And by the way, I love that you added citizenship. Citizenry, incidentally, is not a well enough understood, discussed, debated, or even a taught subject. So I'm delighted that you actually do this as a full program along with corporate governance. The very subject of corporate governance has moved now from inside closed boardrooms to be under the spotlight of public glare. For a variety of reasons, both in India and globally, the behavior of companies is now under scrutiny for their compact with civil society, with the economy at large, and with the nation state. And I think it has become critical that boards take a hard look at themselves and try to make the changes that are necessary to ensure that they're not just compliant, they're not just ticking the boxes, but they're thinking a little bit ahead, that they are creating for their companies a facilitation where the business itself becomes only one of the things that the company does. The company needs to play an important role in society. And that is why I think this engagement between corporates, governments, and civil society has become a much more important factor today than it ever was. The interesting thing, however, is boards are still spending about the same kind of time on issues of quarterly performances, budgets, etc., as they were exactly 100 years ago. By the way, that's research. 70% of the time of boards is actually being spent on this. What is required, what is demanded of boards is that they ought to spend a little bit more time on more forward-looking issues, more strategic issues, more sustainability issues, and more issues to do with the engagement that the company, the corporate, the institution, and its teams have with society at large. And we can see that, whether it's conversations of sustainability taking place in the world, whether it's conversations on changes in weather patterns, each of them comes back to the role being played by the corporates in society now, which is why it is no longer possible for corporates, as Rekha said, to be a group of friends of the founders, promoters, initial shareholders, to be able to manage or govern the company in a manner that it needs to be steered today. A good mix of a board is genuinely a good mix of backgrounds, professions, experience, and exposure of the different members on the board. I will not go into the requirement of gender bias because that is a given, and I think it's recognized world over that that's something we need to correct. And I'm glad that the first steps have been taken towards that. But as I'm saying, it is only the first steps right now. I hope and wish that this as a movement will gain more currency in the future. It's also important today, that boards expose themselves much more to changes taking place due to technology, because it has become all pervasive. It does take up all in most companies, it takes up a lot of time in conversations on what's going on the shop floor, what's going on in the management, but still not enough across the board in governance of the companies. And I think that's an area which needs to get a little bit more attention than it is getting right now. We do know that things like artificial intelligence are able to give a massive boost to the operations of companies. They're able to catapult their efficiencies to as much as 10 times or more. And I don't need to go into details because we're talking of in generic form across all companies. So there is a host of issues that are today impacting business, which needs the boards to be better exposed and better engaged. And they can only be if they have the experience in those areas, whether it is to do more to do with safety, whether it is to do more with social engagements. I think it's absolutely important. And we do know that the distinction between family-owned businesses and the more widely held businesses used to be quite extreme. Increasingly, we are finding that the smarter family-owned businesses, which want to both perpetuate the business and to perpetuate quality of governance in their companies, are now making a significant change at both levels, including more professional management within the companies and at the board level, ensuring a variety of exposure and experience of board members, also realizing that the value and wealth of their families lies in the companies, and incidentally, not just in the cash flows of the companies, but as we are seeing increasingly much more in the valuation of the companies by not just share markets, but also by society at large. So this, as you can see, is a subject close to my heart, so I can go on, but I do have an amazing panel here with me. So I'm going to stop myself now and go on to, to start a conversation with the panel. So Harsh, I'm going to start with you first. You know that Anne Mulcahy, the former CEO of Xerox, used to say that succession planning should be gradual and thoughtful, with lots of sharing of information and knowledge and perspective, so that it's almost a non-event when it actually does happen. Now, she was not talking of everything, but she was here talking about the senior most positions, but clearly the same holds good for the board. Do you think it is possible to keep succession planning in India organic and organized, considering that we have seen in many cases, especially next gen of the promoters, who are in a hurry to get in and get into the saddle and start driving businesses from the board itself?
Sunil, thank you. And first of all, good evening to everybody, my fellow panelists, all the people who have assembled here, participants, listeners. And of course, Rekha, I can just assure you, I also missed IIMA, but that doesn't mean that, you know, I would be available as frequently as I was when you were driving me. But anyway, Sunil, I think you raised a very pertinent question. To come directly to the point, I think it can certainly be organized. And it should be organized, like any succession planning. Frankly, even for a successful company, planning of succession is a very important topic for planning people. So why not the board? Yes, in the earlier period, you had a mindset, or at least in India, we had a mindset where you had a continuity of the board. As we mentioned, you know, people were there unless they were not really adding value, or frankly, they became too old. But so I'll give you a recent example. It so happens coincidentally that literally about 3 weeks ago, we had a meeting, a group meeting. As you know, we are a diverse group with different businesses and different independent companies. The major companies are all listed. So the group chairman actually wrote to all of us. All of us means all the managing directors from the family, as well as all our professional directors, the executive directors, if I may put it that way, and our company secretaries and our CFOs. And said, I'd like to have a meeting to review what is the planning for our board members going forward. So actually, we took each company and we looked at who are the directors who are likely to retire in the next 2 or 3 years. And we thought in terms of saying, who could be other possible people who could be valuable board members. So there is a method, and we've actually, it so happened that we actually started doing that right now. So it should be organic, it should be organized, certainly. Point number one. Having said so, I think you talked of 3, 4 other issues, and so did the earlier speakers. In terms of board diversity, boards need to be diverse from the point of view, of course, based on the kind of business there is, based on the kinds of knowledge they bring, so that the direction of management is more wholesome and management is better equipped and more knowledgeable to deal with running of the business. So they bring in experiences, they bring in, as you said, they should be well read, they should be aware of trends. And because those board members also serve on other boards, different businesses, different industries, and have seen different situations, they are able to add a lot of knowledge and wealth of information. Even earlier, again, I go back to our own group, the standard sort of prototype was that you would have to have one finance person, maybe somebody from the legal fraternity. You had people from business, obviously, etc. So there was diversity, but now new things are coming in technology. the whole focus on marketing, for example, for any business, not just an FMCG business. So we need to bring this. I'll make one final point in my opening comments here, which is board directors, particularly when we get into this whole issue of independent directors, need to recognize that running a company by any executive management is no easy task. So it is easy sometimes to say this should be the case. However, one has to think in terms of saying, how would you really respond to a situation that comes in terms of running a company? So I think the independent directors, or any director for that matter, needs to be supportive of management. I'm not talking of cases where management is lax or where management has very poor corporate governance standards, but generally be supportive, encouraging.
So, Mr. Singhania, you are here at this panel because you do all these things.
Thank you. Very kind.
Thank you.
Kind.
Thank you.
But,
very much appreciate that. Yeah.
Just one quick point, but also hold a mirror to the management and challenge them in different ways that they may perform better.
Good. Well said. Shiv, let me come to you. You are one of India's, acknowledged as one of India's top professionals, and you have demonstrated that over and over in your professional career in many, many different ways. One of the things many boards have been accused of is spending too much time looking at the rear view mirror rather than looking ahead. With that in mind, what do you think are the key attributes that one needs to be concerned about when you're looking at new positions to be filled up in the boards as some of the key concerns that one should have, and what are the no-nos that one needs to watch out for?
Yeah, thanks, Sunil, for that wonderful question. When we look at succession for boards and all the boards that I have been in, I think the first thing is the personality of the board member. Okay? Second is the character of the board member. Third is his or her communication skills. But most important, the culture fit with the others on the board. Whenever we found that somebody does not fit with the other board members, then the board is frustrated, he is frustrated, or she is frustrated. When the person fits in well, then going back to your quote of Anne Malkati, it's absolutely smooth and things work out very well. I think you started by saying boards are spending a lot of time looking at the rearview mirror, 70% is reviews. I think that comes naturally to board members. And it comes naturally because we have two types of board members. One is executives who come and sit on a board and they're giving their company examples or their ecosystem examples. And second is retired people who are on the board. The average age of board members in India is 68. And these are what we call on boards old record players. They're playing the old record and they're not in tune with the new digital music at all. So I think infusing the board with future talent in the area of digital, in the area of consumer marketing or trend spotting, things like that, is the only way to shake up board thinking. The next is the board also must demand the same from the CEO and the executive directors from the company. Many times the board does not demand that, and hence you only get backward-looking reviews.
Thank you, Shiv. Very well said. Let me come to you, Arun. One of the issues which is hotly debated right now is the role of the independent board members on boards. As you know, when SEBI first introduced this entire concept and then pushed for a whole set of regulations, including in the contract that you sign with the exchange itself, of saying that we will have so many independent members, this will be their role, etc. And then they said the independence of independent board members is also critical to measure and weigh. And there was a big pushback, by the way, if you remember in those days, there was a big pushback saying, if somebody has no connection with the company or the founders or the management or the board, what interest would they have in providing quality advice to this board? And this, of course, has gone back and forth. It has maneuvered and seen many changes take place. Now, you have played this role yourselves wonderfully well, and you are, by the way, appreciated as a quality independent director. Do you see any change that is meaningful having taken place with the induction of board members now that the regulations are somewhat clear? We also have another change coming up in the future, which I shall talk about a little bit later. If you'll take this on first.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you for this wonderful question. Let me share with you my own experience. I think the role and performance and contribution of independent directors have evolved in my experience as serving as independent director over the last 20 plus years. It has become much more focused, valuable, and value added in the last, I would say, decade or 5 years. But I would say still it is evolving. And the question of how independent is independent director is still not answered adequately, or maybe it is not answerable. And some people say that independence is a state of mind, and it's a state of your own professional conviction and values. But may I take a minute and share with you my personal experience about board succession planning? But 2 years ago, I became concerned about one phenomena which was taking place in Indian boards, which was that in 2014, we had the new Companies Act, which mandated that there should be a certain number of independent directors. It also mandated that their term should not be more than 5 years. And a whole host of companies entered into this arrangement and appointed independent directors for a period of 5 years. Came 2019, in most companies, those independent directors' term was again renewed for 2024. And at least some of the boards that I was on, I saw that. But it also became very clear to me that in 2024, a whole bunch of independent directors will retire and they will be replaced. And there'll be this watershed event that new independent directors come in, the old need to go out because the term is expiring, without any overlap, without any orientation, without any induction of the new independent directors properly with the old independent director. So what did I do? I went to the chairs of 3 companies that I was independent director, and I said, this is not appropriate. I should step down before my term expires, and so should other independent directors, so that we have an orderly succession and not a event in 2024 that everybody has to move. So I stepped down over the last 2 years from 3 boards. I helped the chair recruit my replacement. I was chair of the audit committee of one board. So we recruited a wonderful person, much better than me, to replace me as chair of the audit committee. And the second company, I was chair of nomination remuneration committee. And we got somebody to replace me. And all that process has worked well. I chair board of one company where, again, we are in the process of making sure that I, as a chairman, retire much prior to my term's expiration, and the other independent directors also step down before the 2024 timeframe, and we have orderly succession and induction of new directors. So my suggestion or request to all the chairs of the boards is that please look at this strange phenomena of 2024 and make sure that that's not the time where most of your directors are stepping down.
Thank you, Arun. Very well said. Let me come to you, Professor Raghunath. Now, you have seen this as an academic. You actually researched this very subject, and I know that sometimes there's also been some conversations about this. One of the things we find is, as I said, in the old days, boards are usually a group of friends, and that was normal, it was accepted. That started to change. In some companies, it's changed completely. In some, it is still a little bit of an echo chamber. There's this saying that everyone is thinking alike, then frankly, no one is thinking outside the box. So do you find that this is still happening in a large number of companies, or do you think a sufficient number of companies have now matured? And the second part to the same question is that, therefore, do you feel there is still a shortage of quality talent to be independent board members? This is a takeoff from also what Arun was saying, and also a question which is coming from the audience. I'm going to keep taking questions from the audience as well as we go ahead. And I'm also going to request, after you finish, to each of the panelists to kindly keep the answers very short now. I'd like to take at least one or two more from each of you.
Thank you, Mr. Munjal, for this excellent question. There has been a sea change in terms of the way directors are being nominated to the boards. I must say that I don't think that is the case anymore, for the simple reason that boards have become active in the arena of not just compliance, as we have all observed. There's 70% of time being spent in looking at the past and dissecting it. And that 30%, I think, is growing not because there is a wisdom, but there are compulsions which are coming in from the environment, from the technology changes that are happening, and regulation, which is always changing. So, no, the challenges are growing several fold, and this club atmosphere is disintegrating in terms of these challenges. And therefore, what I see, and I'm sure, Mr. Munjal, given your years of experience, not just running boards, but also the company, one of the critical pieces to this whole story is the agreement on the kind of current skills and experience required at the top level in the company to execute the company's current and future strategy. And I say this because I have seen that there is a common roadblock, commonly seen, to have a discussion on successions, but no consensus about what the company's short and long-term strategy should be, and which in turn will impact the choice made about succession in terms of who comes in and what is the kind of talent and expertise that we require. So I think the common ground is about assessments of factors that impact the business today, will impact the business 24, 36 months from now. And obviously the changing customer demands, regulatory changes with this climate piece suddenly coming up in a very serious way, and the kind of technological advances that you so very nicely alluded to right in the beginning about AI, ML, and a whole host of analytics piece, which is now coming into business. So the ability for the board to agree on how the company's strategy should reflect these changes, and to then identify skills and experience needed, both at the board level and at the top management level, is something I think companies today are grappling with. The board composition is undergoing gradual change. It's not as if it is happening all of a sudden, but there is a gradual change. And there is some refreshing thinking in this direction about how do we really lead the company into the future. And the point that Mr. Shivkumar made about good cultural fit is I think the sine qua non of the essential
Absolutely.
Piece to how
absolutely critical. Yeah, completely agree. First, let me come back to you. They say the closest you can come to immortality is by creating good succession for yourself. None of us are really immortal, but if some of the value system can transfer on, it says a lot. Now, one of the issues we find is that in family-owned businesses, fortunately, more and more of them are looking forward, looking in a more transparent and a more balanced manner at businesses. So one thing that many families who own business have started to do is to train the next generation, not just to be good managers, but also to be good owners and to be good board members. I don't think enough are doing it though. I don't know what your experience on this is and whether you have any system or process in place in your companies.
Sunil, that's a good question. So at the outset, let me say I agree with you that perhaps not enough is being done. But the good news is happening as more and more people realize. Look, let me narrate it very quickly that before I get to the board, when at least my generation, I'm sure it's the same with you and me, when we got into businesses, which were family run, set up by our forefathers, we never got to the corner office. We never got a seat at the corner office. We worked out, or most of us have worked our way up from the shop floor. The only advantage you had being as a family member, you did have a fast track. Let me be very candid on that. But we all did that. So we observed, we saw, we did that. Now on the board level also, at least I would remember that I was not parachuted on the board as soon as I got into business. The fast track was that maybe, not in the beginning, but after a while, after a few years, I may have been allowed to sit as an observer in a boardroom when a board meeting was done. So one observed how governance happens as opposed to running a business alone. So I think it's the same way the next gen people need to get an exposure to in family businesses, both the informal one, which is the one I'm talking about, and the formal thing, as in how do you really learn to be responsible board members? What is expected of you as a board member and a possible future leader of the board? Now, I know Arun ji has done a lot of work on boards, and there is a system. And if you actually go and you go to management courses like IIM, there is a method. They teach you how board governance, etc., in a practical way. So I think I'd agree that there has to be a way.
Thank you. Shiv, I have a two-part question for you. One is on joint ventures. We have a large number of joint ventures and ever increasing in the country. Both Indian and foreign partners get together to build these. I'm talking about foreign joint ventures. Of course, they're Indian too. Now, in the case of this being a partnership with an Indian family-owned business, one set of the promoters, which is the Indian family, remains kind of constant, whereas executives from the foreign companies who are the partners often changes. And it's like a schizophrenic board in those cases. Sometimes you get a board member amazingly supportive. Then you get another one who has a completely different point of view, sometimes even negative point of view because of country perception. Could be a whole host of different reasons. How do you then manage to maintain balance in a business where the view of board members who are keyboard, and these are keyboard members, varies from time to time and sometimes quite significantly? I'll stop at this one. I'll come to the next question later on. You're still muted. Shiv, please unmute yourself.
So you're absolutely right. We had a joint venture between PepsiCo and Tata's in a company called Narishco. So we had X number of people there before, then I came and took over, etc. I was there for 4 years before I handed over to somebody else. The first element is that both parties are not agreed or synergistic on how to look at the market and the consumer. Till you have a commonality of that view, it is not about financial resource or etc. One party feels this is the direction, that we build our own distribution, we build our own go-to-market. The other party feels no, being asset heavy is a poor model, let's go asset light. So these are the kind of fundamental discussions which happen. Till the JV and the people who put the JV together, the CEOs of the two companies or the chairman of the two companies, agree on a charter and say this will apply for the next 10 years and one cannot veto this or one cannot go against it in a significant manner without both of you agreeing to it, then JVs are always a challenge, where one person always thinks that he's short-charged and one person thinks that he's more intelligent. So this is a genuine challenge which I see in all JVs.
Absolutely, by the way. And that's the reason I raised it, because it then creates a challenge in actually operation and management of the business. It directly starts to put a shadow on the operations.
Absolutely right. And it's also the choice. For example, you'll say the chairman has to be from one company, the CEO from the other company, the CFO from the another company, etc. That itself becomes a battle rather than saying, let's pick the best people for this company and let's look ahead.
So there's a question again, I'm picking up audience questions also as we go along. There's a paradigm shift from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. Please share your experience on this.
Yeah, so I would say in my experience, Sunil, the company characteristic plays a significantly more important role than either the national or cultural characteristics. So the company characteristic could be family, could be cooperative, could be privately listed, could be government, could be JV, as you mentioned, etc. All that. Now, the whole concept of stakeholder management as opposed to shareholder management, why is it happening? I think significantly higher volatility in the market, significantly higher valuations in the market, significantly higher activist investors in the market. Okay, that activism of investors is coming to the Indian market. As a result of all that, then significantly higher demands on sustainability and ecology. So if you go back into 1960s, okay, there were fewer boards than fewer companies. An average company was measured on 6 measures at best. Today, a company is measured on anything between 55 to 75 measures. We report so much to the authority, it's not funny. So every single person with a suitcase has a self-serving interest to say, is the company doing it? The number of diversity people, the number of women on the board, the number of differently abled people, for everything we have a measure today. So that's the reason why we have so much stakeholder interest right now. I think somewhere people will draw a line to say, this is a basic and it's a given, you need to build on it. That's where I see the future.
Right, thank you, well said. Arun, we are right now in the middle of a churn taking place. During the COVID, lots and lots of people, and this has become a global phenomenon, just chucked up their jobs. Many have said, I want to do different things. So this great shift taking place, what does it mean for boards? How are they guiding companies to maintain stability, to maintain growth, despite the dramatic number of people who've just walked away from companies?
A very good question. Let me respond to it. I'm just reflecting my own personal experiences that this is impacting companies in a very significant way, that you have to look at talent in a more wholesome manner and be prepared that there would be junctures at which a lot of talent would need to be replaced. They either walk out or circumstances change that you require a different type of talent. So the boards have now to deal with this issue. And that's where I think the succession planning within the company for all key positions has become even more important, because otherwise you had the luxury of taking, a view of a set of potential successors for each position for 5 years, 7 years, develop them. But that time frame will get shortened significantly. May I just pose another issue which is on my mind, based on my experience, which is the new unicorns and the rapid development of entrepreneurship.
I was actually coming to that in the next round.
Okay.
Arun, then let me finish one question with Professor Raghunath. I'm going to come back because that is the true big shift that is taking place right now in the entire economy. And it is worth taking note of. So I'm sorry to cut you off. but I do want to bring that up. Professor Raghunath, right now, people are asking, are independent board members truly independent? If they are picked by management or by the current team at the board, then obviously there are people who are known to some or the other. How do you genuinely create independence? And by the way, does it really matter?
Yes, I think the nominations committee is a critical committee, right? And who sits on the nomination committee also is a critical piece of decision. Now, the reason why that is very true in terms of ensuring that there is professionalism and unbiased thinking is because an independent director is not thinking about the stakeholders who are represented in the board, but they're thinking about the future of the company. So it is not one particular stakeholder versus the other. It is about the joint value creation that happens and whether that value is being appropriated and disseminated in a manner which is equitable and fair is something that is a luxury, right? So we always need a third party to adjudicate, especially when we get into a crisis or there is something that is hitting news headlines, and you really have to do damage control. And I think it is better to have an internal critique, somebody who really means well in terms of wealth creation and wealth maximization, irrespective of the stakeholders and what they have to say and what their interests are, in the collective into account. I think it is very essential to have independence in thinking. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have now about 12 minutes to go, and we'll probably have a 2-minute wrap up. So I'm going to request each of you to kindly be kind to the rest of your panelists and try and respond in 2 to 2.5 minutes. And I want this entire set only on the new age businesses, their innovation, their impact on society, business, economy, etc. So let me start back with you, this time reverse, Professor. Now, of the immense valuation that has been achieved by a few startups, we do know there, by the way, there are tens of thousands who are struggling right now. And how do you think the boards in these companies can play a role which allows the company to look forward, but be balanced and not get blown away by these numbers?
I think the important realization today is, and you all know it much more than us, is that the circumstances of the customers is indeed changing. So the customer segments that we are all focusing on, the reality that is hitting the customer is very different from what it was earlier. So if you look at the customer's own value chain and the kind of destruction that has happened there, it obviously changes the way we deliver value. And I think that is where all the unicorns are making all the money. So they have ways of reaching. And if the last mile is taken care of, and if you are connected anywhere and everywhere, and you are able to make that value very distinct to them, this is very different from what we thought of, that value was always created inside companies. Now, the whole definition of value is undergoing change. It is not just what is created within companies. It is about whether there is access, whether there is choice in variety, on the variety that a company offers. And can that choice be exercised meaningfully, efficiently, and at a cost that a customer is willing to pay? And that is why I think the business models are changing. And the sooner companies wake up to this and are willing to allocate budgets and obviously resources, I think they will be a very good arena of competition for the guys who have just started off with the ones who actually know how to make it all work and happen.
Yeah, disruption is real. We've seen this now. Yeah. Very old established businesses suddenly get upended by somebody who's just starting off. And the automotive industry and the tech industry are clear examples. And there are many more, of course. So you look at the pharma industry. Arun, now you can answer your own question, please. Go ahead.
Yes. But 12 years ago, I joined the board of InfoEdge, a Naukri.com company run by two wonderful entrepreneurs, Hitesh Oberoi and Sanjeev Pichchandani. The company has done very well. The valuation at that time was about $100 million, is $10 billion now. But along the way, the board decided, basically prodded by Sanjeev, that we should make investments. We have done very well as entrepreneurs. We should support more entrepreneurs. So we decided to invest part of our funds to support entrepreneurs. And we made investments in companies like Zomato and Policy Bazaar and others. Now, I used to chair the audit committee, and my job was to worry. And I used to worry about how would these companies, which are growing very rapidly, both in terms of business and value, are going to be governed. How will these entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, learn the value of governance, the importance of governance? Because many of the family-owned companies like Sunil, yours, or Harsha's, you've seen in generations how the companies should be managed, how boards should be managed. But these wonderful young entrepreneurs who are building great businesses would not have that benefit of that experience. So I personally used to spend a lot of time with these investee companies talking about what needs to get done in terms of systems, processes, governance, etc. So my view on this is that I'm so pleased that we are having so many unicorn and discons coming up. But these companies do need some degree of experienced people who can help them with governance.
Let me expand that. So thank you, Arun. I completely agree with you, by the way. A little bit of hand-holding and a hand on the shoulder would be very helpful for many of them, which is why those which have good mentors are actually the ones who are showing the best real performance at this moment. Shiv, so let me push this a little bit further. Why do you think startups and the ecosystem for startups is important, in fact, critical today for large industry in India?
Yeah, great question again, Sunil. The first thing is the whole concept of digital, which has been around for some time. It is a horizontal capability and not a vertical capability. It cuts across the organization. And most organizations have not prepared themselves for that. So tying up with startups, learning how they do it is absolutely critical. If you look at all organizations, we've used digital to disrupt the cost side. We've not used digital to disrupt the revenue line, which is what all these young startups are doing. And that is something we can learn from all of them. The third thing I would say is that every middleman who adds no value is absolutely brutally killed by digital technology. And I think legacy industries have too many middlemen with too much margin in there. And the whole concept of digital is actually deflationary on cost. And that is where the money is getting unlocked for you to put it somewhere else to grow. And I think running a digital organization in a unit cannot be like a banyan tree. It cannot run under the shadow of the mothership or whatever it is. It has to be an incubator or an accelerator system. That's when it will create value. But having said all this, Sunil, unit economics always is the king. Whether you're a startup or you're a legacy company, if your unit economics is bad, which is revenue minus cost of acquisition, you don't make money, there is no future. So this bubble will burst for a few people. This bubble will, grow for a few people.
Harsh, let me come back to family. I don't mean to ask only you, the family-owned businesses questions, but since you are the leader here in today's conversation of a business that's been owned by family through generations.
I can always delegate it back to you, Sunil.
So let me ask you a question. There are many families who used to coach and counsel their future generations on learning everything about their own businesses. There are some now who are saying, I don't want you to learn my business. I want you to go and do something new. So are startups the way to go for these families, or is there a third option available?
Well, it's a good question. See, I think the obvious one is where more and more people in family businesses are saying, do something new. Now, there could be multiple reasons. And frankly, Sunil, we have good examples from your family, of your generation or next generation, actually, from you, who are doing it currently and proving that is working, right? Yeah. So we have to go far. But having said so, there are several reasons today. One is a lot of the sort of younger people who are coming into family businesses, family members, may not be interested in the legacy businesses. They are not interested in the manufacturing time businesses. They are not interested, and most of them have now been educated abroad. They are used to a different kind of ecosystem to a great extent, and they don't want to spend their time in running after solving, regulatory issues of the nature. Go to this person, get this cleared, get that cleared. Look at a lot of the other stuff that happens in our system. So they just don't want to do this. They say, leave me out of this. I want to do something separate. So maybe the family or the family office or the companies concerned allocate them separate capital. That's one. The second is that what is also happening is that, frankly, the newer businesses, as all the panelists have said, Shiv said, and Arun was saying that, they have been, the rate of growth of these businesses is definitely very different and much, much more than the legacy businesses, right? So even business groups want to have those new beachheads. So therefore, they may ask them to do this. And I think that's a great way to do something new for a family business, to be disruptors, maybe because you see, you have a safety net as well. The safety net is, if you fail, you can always go back a little bit into that safety net. So I think that is one way. But the third thing that you were asking is there a middle path? Perhaps yes. There is. Is there a method to the madness? Not entirely, but there is some structure. And that is where some kind of mentoring from others, whether it's a family member or from somebody outside, comes in very useful to navigate that trajectory.
Right. So thank you. And thank you guys for doing this wonderfully timely. We're at 6:58. We have 2 minutes to go. So this is a hard session to sum up because each panelist made such a wonderful set of comments.
Sunil, with your permission, can I come in literally for 45 seconds on a point that we have not discussed on the board?
Sure.
See, now, as we go ahead, we need to make a distinction between a legal board versus other board concepts, the supervisory board or the advisory board, etc. So, as everybody said, too much time is spent on the regulatory stuff. To some extent, the legal board can do that. But the real strategy, the real business has to be brought out to the board itself. And for that, board members on a legal board also must commit to more time. And they must, and I've also seen the other thing, it depends on how much the management is also willing to challenge them. So if I go to our board and say, look, I really don't know what to do with this. I want your advice. They are very generous in their advice. But if I sort of rush the agenda and say, TK, I know this, they're not going to say too much beyond the point, however independent they are. It's human nature. Nobody listens to somebody who's not listening, right?
Right. Thank you.
Bring that dimension.
Thank you, Harsh, and you brought us to 6:59. So wonderful. So we're at the perfect time to sum this up. I know there are many questions have been raised, many hands have been raised. I apologize to those we've not been able to cover, but that's all we could actually manage in this hour and try and get the best out of this outstanding panel. So thank you, IIM, and thank you, AIMA, for a wonderful opportunity to be able to talk to this expert panel on a subject which clearly is not just important, but some of the issues being discussed are of an urgent nature of criticality and importance, both for society as also for business and industry. And the only one actually we left out, we covered startups, we covered family-owned businesses, we covered a little bit of joint ventures, we covered large private enterprise. We did leave out the public sector, and I wish we had had time to discuss that as well, because there is a serious implication of governance of that sector of enterprise as well, as much as it is on the rest of them. So thank you all very much. Rekha, would you like to wrap up, or Padmini, either one of you?
Padmini, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for this wonderful and very insightful panel. Like you mentioned, it's very timely. I once again thank the panelists for taking time out, and thanks Mr. Munjal for moderating this session so beautifully, very timely. So thanks to Professor Raghunath, Mr. Shivkumar, Mr. Duggal, and Mr. Singhania for this wonderful session. And of course, thanks Rekha and Peter for organizing this meet. Really very insightful and timely. Thanks once again to all the participants for logging in.
Thank you, Padmini, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We are launching the Management Cafe on 1st December. I hope to have many of you back with us again. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Munjal. Thank you to all the speakers. I won't keep you anymore.
Thank you. Bye.